It is hard to believe how quickly technology has evolved for video games, from pixels into the most realistic games to ever to exist. However, in comes a revolution to video games. Instead of using computer-generated graphics or sprites for characters, real actors portrayed a video game character in a make-believe world. During the early 90s, actors started to appear in video games using full motion video, or FMV for short, often quoted by developers and publishers at the time that full motion video will be the next step into video game realism. The playtime for these games normally took 1/8 of the time to complete due to the exponential cost of filming alone, and even with non-namesake Hollywood actors. Only a select few games featured and utilised full motion video with real actors, some being Police Quest SWAT, Phantasmagoria, Return to Zork, and Who Shot Johnny Rock. But one game caught the attention of all the rest and was known as the most violent game ever to be released: Night Trap. This one game caused such an uproar across the globe that it single-handedly brought in video game ratings. From an idea that started out impossible due to the lack of technology available, it grew into one of the most well-known video games within the industry. Get your traps ready, confirm that your colour is on red, and we'll explore each nook and cranny to uncover how Night Trap changed the video game industry forever. How did technology in the late 80s and early 90s end up supporting very pixelated and compressed video? Well, it started with the introduction of the Laserdisc in the late 70s, which, for those who weren't born yet, picture a CD, but bigger. Laserdiscs had increased storage and better quality than cassette tapes. As the Laserdisc became more widespread, video game studios were able to utilize Laserdisc and incorporated full motion video. While these titles that were released were only animation and found in arcades due to the cost, these titles stood out as they allowed for very high quality visuals compared to the contemporary arcade titles. Some notable releases that utilized this technology was Astron's Belt and Dragon's Lair. Popularity surrounding the Laserdisc grew and thus production increased, but only for a short time, as an evolution of the Laserdisc was released, known as the compact disc, or CD for short. Released in the early 80s, the CD improved on the visuals even further and allowed for more interactivity with the audio and visuals, as well as faster transition and more responsiveness. The impact led to many developments occurring surrounding the implementation of full motion video into video games. But it wasn't the technology of capturing the video that was behind, it was the consoles. James Riley, Night Trap's director, mentioned in a retrospective interview with My Life in Gaming that the consoles at the time were lacking the ability to display more than one video channel at once. Nolan Bushnell, co-founder of the technology company called Axlon, wanted to create a product that could compete with Nintendo, since it was the major console on the market and had majority market share. The small world starts coming together when Rod Phillips, who happened to be the neighbour of James, knew Tom Zito, which was working at another Nolan company that had the ability to alter the VCR tape. An engineer working under Tom designed an attachment that could connect to a video cassette recorder, or VCR for short, which would allow you to seamlessly switch between 4 video sources at once. While the technology didn't utilize CDs or even Laserdiscs, it still allowed for seamless transition between the sources of video, which can be layered together at once. Tom was unsure how this technology could be utilized, which led to the idea of a whodunit style game called Scene of the Crime, and was a showcase of the technology and how it could be utilized within the video game industry. If you haven't heard of Scene of the Crime or know its development, it is very close to the games like Cluedo or Clue for those North Americans watching. You're watching over a safe within a house, then power goes out, and someone robs the safe full of precious jewellery. You've got to view the cameras to find out who took the jewellery. The gameplay is very straightforward and doesn't offer much in gameplay variety, as the end of the game is basically becomes a police lineup and you select who you believe took the jewellery. This was a rough pitch, there was a clear gameplay loop and wasn't intended to be played continuously over and over. James mentioned that when they pitched the idea to the 23 executives at Hasbro Entertainment, they loved what they were shown, and for the small team, they received funding to go on and develop a full game using full motion video technology. And they also created another company by the name of Digital Pictures to focus solely on full motion video titles. Since Hasbro Entertainment invested in Digital Pictures, Tom Zito, its CEO, partnered with Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari, founded another company, because not like this is getting confusing already. Being a subsidiary of Axlom, they co-developed a console with Hasbro Entertainment that could utilize track switching technology and play full motion video games. Codenamed Nemo, and depends on who you asked, Nemo either stood for Never Mention Outside or Nintendo ends mid-October, the original planned release month. But other than the confusing name, the official name for the console was Control Vision. Hasbro Entertainment backed out of the deal, stating that hardware costs would be too high to keep the original target of $100 in 1989, which is ridiculously cheap compared to Nintendo's consoles that would double the cost. And in 2025, a Control Vision will cost $258. Hasbro also said that it would be too hard to convince families to purchase a Control Vision compared to other consoles already on the market. This also impacted the release of Night Trap, which again you might already know. Night Trap was filmed in 1986 according to James Riley, but again everyone says something different, but 1987 is the more recognised year as it was filmed. Just 2 months out of the release, the console was cancelled, which led to Night Trap being indefinitely shelved, as there was no video game company that had the technology to utilise full motion video. With so many companies and executives having their say, Night Trap evolved throughout the night and became a title that was playing on the spoof of vampire tropes, but it wasn't always like this. James Riley mentioned to My Life in Gaming that the original idea was to expand on the prototype scene of the crime, where you would watch over a billionaire's house, similarly described as being Fort Knox, which would include watching security cameras and activating traps. One weekend, the daughter of the billionaire would throw a slumber party, and the house would be attacked by, quote, burglar ninjas. This idea and premise is extremely close to the final version of Night Trap, except you're protecting females from vampires and augurs. Of course, the development team got started and created multiple pictures, including the billionaire's house. They liked the idea of an evolution of scene of the crime, but didn't know how to elevate that level of gameplay. After multiple iterations and concepts, they ended on the idea of vampires as the main villain. As I previously mentioned, the exact filming year is often known as 1987, but the director said it was filmed in 1986. This even goes to the length of time it took. The filming of each individual set was done room by room, starting with all the bedroom scenes were done at once, then the kitchen, and so on. As James said in a retrospective documentary, that filming started with the bedroom and ended with the foyer, with it taking roughly 16 days to film on a budget of $1.5 million, and adjusting for inflation is $4.23 million in 2025. Rod Phillip, a programmer for Night Trap, said to Nintendo Life in 2018 that it was shot in 16 days in 1987 and took another few months to edit into the separate tracks. James said that the filming was hard, having to have the actors in the correct spots at the same time, so when they move from room to room, they're exactly on time, instead of slightly before or after. The editing took the longest to get all complete and timed correctly, since they had 8 tracks to work with instead of the original 4 that the engineer developed. Along with the original idea for Night Trap, the original plan was to include, quote, sprawling visual experiences that could bridge the gap between video games and Hollywood, which, along with Axlong, they were able to achieve this. Slightly anyway, as you know by now that the Control Vision was cancelled, but didn't stop either Hasbro Entertainment or the limitation of the system to stop Night Trap from being developed. While technology was improving, it had its limitations. Rob Phillips said to Game Instra in 2011 that you could have as many tracks as you want, and the more tracks you had, the more of a sad display you got. So if you had 2 tracks, you would see every other frame. But if you had 30, you can only see 15 frames per second, because on the video it would be like a shuffled deck. You would see only these, so it looked a little fuzzy. If there were 4 tracks, then you would only see 8 frames a second, right? So it would look kind of weird. This also impacted the resolution size. Jumping ahead slightly, but when it was released on the Sega CD, it only played at 168 by 104 size, which, as you can see, this is minuscule. But then enlarged, it really shows its quality. This also affects the number of colors on the screen due to the hardware, and also affected due to the multiple videos running at once, even though there was only one available. Hasbro Entertainment wanted to lessen the violence impact on people playing Night Trap. While the idea was created and finalized, Hasbro did step in to make some creative choices to make sure the game wasn't too violent for people. Yeah, well, we know how that went. As James said to My Life in Gaming that, there was this thing called reproducible violence, and Hasbro in particular was very concerned about that. This led to the team changing the vampires, but Hasbro wasn't happy with the supernatural themes, with them responding saying that they didn't want to see the vampires biting the girls, and thus they transitioned into being toothless vampires. It wasn't just the teeth they wanted to remove. Hasbro also told the creative team that they couldn't have the vampires move fast, and thus the vampires in black, or known as augurs, moved slowly. As James mentions that, they could not move too quickly, so they had to be kind of sick. So they had to be toothless, sick vampires. I mean, it kept getting worse. The augur term for the vampire enemies came because they really needed blood, and the only way they could get it was to augur in with a device like the trocar, which was the neck thing with the drill. To the surprise of James and the whole creative team, the neck drill was approved by Hasbro for non-reproducible violence, as he recollects that it cleared as non-reproducible violence. Well, it turned out to be really gruesome, frankly. I mean, I thought in our effort to humanize this thing and to make it more friendly and less scary, it actually was pretty creepy in terms of these, strange characters walking around with the trocar. The changes to the game didn't just evolve, it was being censored. Jumping ahead slightly, but Nintendo was also forcing changes to occur for titles on their systems. Mortal Kombat was edited for the Super Nintendo to adjust the blood color to green and remove the fatalities, which Gregory Fishback mentioned to the BBC in 2014 that he thought the idea was, quote, pretty stupid, but mentions that he couldn't do anything to stop the requests, otherwise the games wouldn't be allowed on the SNES. While censorship wasn't as prevalent within video games, it still impacted the end consumer on the perception of the game. And an unknown factor for Night Trap was the sets. With complete custom-made sets, it was expensive to produce, as it had to look realistic but fit within the budget, but not as expensive as other games which ultimately end up getting put on the end consumer. In the same interview with GameInstra, Rob says, "We had to make a movie, and it's hard to make a movie. I had to get them to build houses that had traps in them. It costs a lot of money to make these things, and there was a problem that they would break a lot. And ultimately, the games weren't fun enough to justify the purchase price. They weren't that replayable. You can play a Mario 1,000 times, and Night Trap you can play it 10 times. It's more of a rental than a purchase." As an example he used was a similar game to Night Trap being Sewer Shark, where they shot the ending in Hawaii, as everyone had to be flown out to Hawaii, which ended up getting put back on the consumer, as the retail price could end up to $150 United States dollar. Not like games cost this much these days anyway, but back in the 90s, it was expensive. And this goes back to Hasbro's thoughts, that the cost of the game would not outweigh the investment they made, as it would take them longer to regain their investment and start earning net profit. As you know already, Hasbro Entertainment pulled their investment from Night Trap, and ultimately the console as well. Night Trap was ready to go for the Control Vision, it was shelved instead indefinitely, as no other video game company at the time had the technology to display and use full motion video, until Sega came in. Sega saw an opportunity to purchase the titles from the unreleased Control Vision, with Night Trap being one of them. Sega purchased Night Trap, but only the publishing rights, while it was still developed by Axelong and Digital Pictures. Sega went ahead and published Night Trap for their console called Sega CD, or alternatively called Sega Mega CD, in 1992, which was able to utilize the technology of Night Trap, even though it had to get developed again from the start, due to them switching from a video cassette to a CD. While the sale recordings have never officially been released, Night Trap's sales were steady for Sega, but 1 year prior, Nintendo released their Super Nintendo Entertainment System, which evolved the landscape in the North American market. With the Sega CD only selling 2.4 million units, Night Trap was one of the best sellers on the console, even with the limited number of units. And yet, somehow, in 1993, the US Senate would get their hands on Night Trap and go on to describe it as a sick, disgusting video game, and that it's an effort to trap and kill women. For the first time in history, video games came under fire. With 2 Senate hearings in the United States and 1 government hearing in Australia, video games were put in the spotlight, primarily because of Night Trap, which isn't surprising. The 2 US Senate hearings occurred in December 1993 and March 1994, just over a year since the original release of Night Trap for the Sega CD. While the first hearing is more documented and talked about, both hearings cover the same topic of what kind of restrictions should be placed on video games and who should be monitoring or actuating it. While the hearings were focused on young children playing video games, in the early 90s the average age of a gamer was 22 years old. Before I get started talking about the US Senate hearings, an interesting point that stands out is when Night Trap starts to get some media attention, which occurred before any official government intervention. Sega created their own internal rating system, which had 3 different ratings, with general, mature audiences, and not appropriate for children, or just MA-17. Bill White, Vice President of Sega America, mentions that this industry is part of the interactive media industry and has grown tremendously. The children represent only a portion of the audience we try and service with our interactive software. Night Trap was developed specifically for an adult audience. Sega took a leadership position in establishing an independent rating council and appropriately labelled Night Trap MA-17, not appropriate for children. While Sega created their own rating system, it didn't stop the Senate hearing from occurring. In fact, it angered them. 3 United States senators tore down Night Trap, and also Mortal Kombat, which had a similar effect on video games. But Senator Joseph Lieberman, Senator Herbert Cole, and Senator Brian Dorgan started the Senate hearing against video games in December 1993 and decided to isolate it down to Night Trap and Mortal Kombat, with a third title not being shown but was Nintendo's rival turf. The senators started out by bringing out a custom controller for the game Lethal Enforcers, which uses a gun controller instead of the normal buttons for a SNES. Yes, a Nintendo console, Sony's PlayStation and Sega Genesis, with this controller being called the Justifier. This controller and game was slammed by the senators, trying to bring it in relation to real-world gun violence, and how these type of video games lead to more violence from young children. As Senator Herbert Cole said that, and what does this game seem to teach our kids? Basically, a gun can solve any problem. Gun violence was, and still is, an issue within the United States. They reference how seeing violence within the news will lead to more violence from young people due to using a gun controller. Multiple studies have been conducted to prove that there is no link between video game and real-world violence. While there might be some connection, it does have an impact on what is available outside the realm of video games that can change the perception. Before getting to Night Trap and its famous scene, Senator Joseph Lieberman calls Night Trap and Mortal Kombat 2 of the most violent games ever to be released. Wait until he sees games like Grand Theft Auto 5 and Destroy All Humans. He continues to say that, instead of enriching a child's mind, these games teach a child to enjoy inflicting torture. Boys are going to be more sexually aggressive and abusive as a result of the experiences they've had with these games. Several comments that the senators make are about child abuse and harassment of women, and how these games' goal is to inflict abuse on children. Joseph Lieberman starts with saying that these games features strong overtones of sexual violence, by stating that, "I think Night Trap denigrates the sexual group, namely women." Senator Herbert Cole follows on with, "Night Trap, which adds a new dimension, is specifically targeted against women, and is especially repugnant." And Senator Brian Dorgan chiming in, stating that, "Night Trap is a sick, disgusting video game in my judgment. It's an effort to trap and kill women. It's child abuse in my judgment." And this is all surrounding the one scene of Lisa, played by Deborah Parks, in the bathroom getting grabbed by 3 augurs. But they're missing the main point of the game, as I believe everyone watching would understand the main point is to save the women instead of torturing them. Even though they're called out about the scene from Tom Zito, co-founder of Digital Pictures, stating that this is a game over screen, they continue to disregard that fact. They even discussed the leader of SCAT, which means Sega Control Action Team in the final release, but originally meant Special Control Action Team. Again, not on this topic, but he says the following at the start of the game.
"If you don't have the brains or the guts for this assignment, give the controls to someone who does."
They accuse this one and only spoken line to be aimed at males. While it does appear to portray more male influence, it is to showcase what's at stake, being these girls' lives, but it was used to attack the developers and companies. The senators solely focus on that one scene, instead of taking it as the full game or playthrough, as Joseph Lieberman said that, "The object is to keep the hooded men from hanging the young women from a hook, or drilling their necks with a tool designed to drain their blood." I have no idea where this idea of hanging comes around, but it flows into the bathroom scene, as Brian Dorgan said after seeing the bathroom scene, and being told it's a game over screen. The fact that the conclusion of a game like that, quote, game, is to drill into a woman's neck and grab the woman with a metal hook, I don't view that as constructive entertainment. Mallory Droz, the Vice President of the National Coalition of Television Violence, who was on the panel, wasn't happy that the bathroom scene was a game over screen, and doesn't change her opinion on what she's thinking about the scene or the game, stating that magazines teach you how to, quote, inflict torture, which I believe I speak for everyone, and gaming magazines do not do anything like that. Multiple members of the development team and studios would deny the right to talk about the game. As I mentioned earlier with Tom Zito, co-founder of Digital Pictures, was originally invited to the panel, but later on pushed aside, instead leaving no one to really defend the game's development. Tom Zito's statement partly got read, while we don't know how long it would have gone for, but the senators only chose certain parts to include, and one part they surprisingly mentioned was that Night Trap was set out to create a spoof of vampire films. Other than that statement, the only other party involved in Night Trap was Sega. This led to Bill White, the Vice President of Marketing at Sega America, to defend the game, which I believe he did really well, and summarized what the senators were doing by stating that if you only showed the violent and the gory scenes from out of context consecutively one after the other from Roots and Gone with the Wind, you might conclude that they're horrible films. But in reality they aren't, and what you've picked is a particular segment of that game. If you're not familiar with Roots or Gone with the Wind, they are, some controversial films about African Americans and slavery topics. This one comment from Bill White summarizes what the Senate members were doing, to a point that uses real-world examples. And what do you think their reaction is? Nothing. Unfortunately, this spooled into when Bill talked about the rating system that they had created in June 1993. The senators didn't like the idea of having to put ratings on games and censored them. But, what was the hearing for then? Sega created a rating system and showcased it at the hearing. All 3 senators questioned on why it was created and why are children still able to buy Night Trap. I'm fairly sure these people have not gone into a shop at all. No one's going to stop you from buying something you shouldn't, not in the 90s. It is stricter now, but it's a claim that just falls flat. At the end of the hearing, the senators focused on marketing and advertising to be appropriate for children, which Nintendo is very strict, even to this day, on what is allowed on their systems. Referencing Mortal Kombat's port to the SNES, surprisingly Howard Lincoln, the president of Nintendo America, said that they received letters from fans asking why they censored their games. The senators held up an advertisement for the Untouchables video game, which stated they've got a bullet with your name on it. And Howard responded saying that the advertisement was not approved by Nintendo and the company was in breach of their licensing agreement. And immediately the senators praised Nintendo for taking ownership. Howard ends his discussion stating that, "Let me say for the record that I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system. Obviously it would not pass our guidelines." And yeah, we all know how that went. They go on and slam Sega for their handling of Night Trap's marketing, trying to blame them for covering up rating information of their box art for Toys R Us advertisements. And even when Bill tries to defend himself, they do not have ownership over those type of advertisements. They just cut Bill off instead. Throughout this whole hearing, there is bias towards the gaming industry, as Nintendo is praised for their censorship, while when Sega brings in a rating system, they're disregarded and pushed down. The development team and publishers behind Night Trap are ignored and put on a pedestal that they created the most violent game ever to be released. And this is only the first hearing as well. In March 1994, Senators Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl returned for another Senate hearing encompassing the progress made on creating a video game rating system. While they were happy with the progress made, but they continued to still slander Night Trap, even though it was already off the market. Between the previous hearing, Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl announced they introduced a bill into Congress to create a commission to rate video games if the industry fails to develop a rating system within a year, but continued to complain at the industry, being Nintendo, Sega, and Electronic Arts. Surprisingly, they were a major part of this hearing. These companies only make up 60% of the market at the time, and won't be effective unless everyone works together. Herbert Kohl started off by saying, "In the interim, the video game industry has also made headways on other fronts. It has removed one of the worst offenders, Night Trap, which we highlighted at the last hearing, from shelves. But without Night Trap, they wouldn't even have these hearings in the first place, so putting the blame all on this one title seems excessive." An updated or censored version of Mortal Kombat was not released, despite public pressure, but across all documentation, there is no official or public discourse surrounding Mortal Kombat, other than that Nintendo was receiving complaints about their censored version. Why not try and take another stab at linking real-world violence to video games? Congressman Tom Lantos, who was invited to speak at the hearing, who supported Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl in their effort to, quote, censor games, said that, "I think it's important to note that we should not demonize the industry. Torture, sadism, violence have been here long before this industry was born. It's important to realize that we are living in a world which is an unending horror show." Unfortunately, it's the sad truth of what he's talking about, how there are constant attacks within the United States that continually appear across various media outlets, which then video games play on these situations. Tom Lantos hit the topic right on the head. While he didn't mention anything about how Night Trap was meant to play on vampire films and tropes, but they still didn't accept it even when talking about it either. This hearing occurred after Toys R Us pulled Night Trap from the shelves from Sega CD's version, but another version was released, being the 3DO, which was rated by Sega's internal system. Toys R Us continued to have it purchasable, and this wasn't even discussed or questioned by the senators, or even the vice president of toys at Toys R Us. If you don't know already, Australia is often known as having the harshest video game restrictions to date, and similarly to the United States, it started because of Night Trap. To show how harsh Australian laws are on video games, when Left 4 Dead 2 released, Valve was forced to reduce the gore and blood effects of the Australian version, or it wouldn't get sold. While it can be downloaded manually now, this is in 2009, and all with computer graphics, not even involving real actors. When the Australian government heard about Night Trap, they had a similar reaction to the United States government. However, surprisingly, they actually listened to both sides of the game, introducing what the goal is and the negative scenes. As John Dickey stood up and mentioned directly the sole reason of the game, stating that the purpose of the game Night Trap is to save a whole family of people from invaders from outer space. I think a lot of the concern that has risen about the game of Night Trap is some of the methods that intruders from outer space use in capturing the members of the family. There's suggestions of a drill being held at a person's neck and things like that, but from what I've seen of the game, the purpose is to prevent this from happening. While the Australian government understood the meaning behind the game, even if they were being labelled as invaders from outer space, it is clear they were able to understand the goal of saving the females instead of purposely harming them. This did not stop politicians from raising the discussion, as Judith Watson said that, "My concern is that people who play those games play them for a reward. You're rewarded for being violent, as Night Trap features torturing, mutilation and degradation of women." With Michael Lavovich joining in as well, stating that, "I'm very concerned about this message this game would send to users, particularly boys of this game." The technology behind Night Trap was also raised, which includes that without the technology, Night Trap wouldn't be made, and how various countries wouldn't be having this reaction to video games if it was still pixels on a screen, and not involving full motion video. Kevin Bermster summarized it really well, stating that, "I think it's unfortunate that a game like Night Trap was one of the first games to be released in the marketplace. Because of people who get accustomed to this new technology, it's quite a shock to see this level of graphic and this level of gameplay introduced as one of the earlier releases." Followed up with Eugene Provenzo saying that, "Looking at kids and how they play, but also the actual content of the games, what we're doing is we're emerging into a new form of media that is much more intense than previous things, such as television." As the technology was reached in this version of realism, even if it was directly using actors, it showed what could be done with the software surrounding video games. It shows how countries weren't ready for its introduction. With Sega already in hot water in the United States surrounding the game and the publishing, when Judith contacted the Prime Minister of Australia, there was a lot more media coverage surrounding the situation, and Sega made the call not to publish the game in Australia, even with their own rating system. There's a small vocal community asking why the game wasn't published, but it was Sega's choice and not the government. This ultimately led to many games not getting ported or developed for an Australian market, as companies didn't know how to make sure it wouldn't get the same negative media attention that Night Trap had. This all accumulated into how video games should follow the same laws and regulations that film and literature use, with Michael Lavovich saying that, "Currently, the Office of Film and Literature Classification does not classify video games at all. The current system that implies in relation to film and videos would not easily lend itself to video games. The Commission recommends that censorship legislation should be altered to recognize computer games. Some games may be subject to banning if they offend community standards, and others should be subject to restriction or carry an appropriate warning. I am hopeful that the Commonwealth and the states will combine on this matter to devise a regime fleshing out the proposals recommended by the Law Reform Commission." This was primarily a result of concern about lack of regulation in the industry, as Night Trap and Mortal Kombat just keeps coming back. But the main concern was how these graphically violent games are easily accessible to children, as who would police or monitor the children accessing these games? The public perception sprouted up more heavily due to the surge in media attention that Night Trap received, while Sega did remove the game from shelves until they raided Night Trap internally and returned it to stores. There was a hostile reaction about Night Trap, with it being described as a sexist game, as Dame Jill Knight, who was interviewed by the BBC, said that, "It is dangerous for the children and dangerous for the public, and it seems to me it's absolutely outrageous to teach children to maim and to murder and to manipulate in this way this video undoubtedly does." And she was only shown the bathroom scene and nothing else, which even shows that it doesn't matter who the audience is, context is always important. Angus Swan, who was interviewed by the BBC as well, who played Night Trap, mentioned that the evil figures in the game are very jokingly dressed and act in a very campy manner, and the violence is very camped up and can be seen as a joke. No one visibly gets hurt in the game, it's all done by suggestion. These interviews, even done in another country, didn't stop the uproar against Night Trap, with the constant outcry over the level of violence in television and gaming, led to calls to create a regulation for video games. Captain Kangaroo, a famous children's entertainer who was played by Bob Keeshan, voiced his opinion as well, indicating that Night Trap wasn't aimed at young adults or teenagers, but children, stating that the danger arises when the subject of the software is of a violent nature. And Toys R Us caved to public pressure and stopped selling Night Trap, with Michael Goldstein, the Vice Chairman and Chief Financial and Administration Officer, said that, "We took the game off the shelves, and we're not selling it anymore. This is a decision we made several weeks ago with the concurrence of Sega, which agrees with our decision." Tom Zito was disappointed by the decision that Toys R Us chose, but sales surprisingly increased during Senate hearings. No official sales have been released, but it's estimated that with the constant media attention surrounding Night Trap, it sold around 100,000 more during the media craze, which shows how much impact the media has on the entertainment industry. The outcry was too loud for Night Trap, and ultimately, even with all the restrictions, ratings and public attention, it all crumbled down on the development team. Digital Pictures ended up getting dissolved due to public backlash, and nothing would change the opinion that was already out there. With the leap between full motion video and video games, there was more pressure to create a rating system or watchdog to make it appropriate for children. A BBC presenter says that the video game industry believes that the model watchdog will find any excuse to attack it. The model watchdogs are worried that with the live action pictures and fantasy world of computer games is becoming indistinguishable from films and videos. Gregory Fishback, the chief executive for Acclaim, who developed Mortal Kombat, spoke to the BBC and raised various points about video games and how the landscape is evolving, yet the population do not accept the change, as he states that, at one point in time, games were just meant for children, and nobody really took them seriously. But it was with the launch of Mortal Kombat that people who controlled the media began to look at it differently. Part of the problem at the time was the biggest distributor in the US was Toys R Us. The positioning in the marketplace was that games are designed for children and not teenagers or young adults. This encompasses the outcry, as without any media attention, these games would have not been described or even discussed the way they were. Even today, you rarely hear about video games in primetime news stories, unless you're reading a direct piece of media tailored to video games. Blake Harris, author of Console Wars, spoke to BBC about the issue and mentioned that, "I think the outrage was mostly from the media. I think parents, for the most part, still didn't realise what video games were. I could be wrong, but I spent 3 years researching this, and not once did I get the sense that people were spurred upon by angry calls or angry letters from parents. Howard Lincoln told me that he got numerous angry letters from parents, but it was people complaining about Nintendo censoring their games. They didn't like the green blood. I think it tells you how much this issue was media driven." All of this accumulated into what would become the foundation for the video game rating system. While there are different rating systems across the globe, the main and most commonly known is the ESRB, which stands for Entertainment Software Rating Board, with Australia being boring and not having anything fancy. The ESRB was created with members of the video game industry consisting of Nintendo of America, Sega America, Electronic Arts, and various retail stores as well. These companies were all present at the second hearing, and surprisingly for Electronic Arts Vice President Jack Heinstein, he took the lead and spoke on behalf of the whole video game industry to Senators Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl. Joseph Lieberman made a great comment about the rating system, a one-and-done unique comment, stating that a strong rating board must be 1. Independent, 2. Have members who reflect the public and not the industry, 3. Have the power to penalise wrongdoers, 4. Be able to keep pace with technology advances, 5. Create ratings that are clearly understood by consumers, and 6. Advertise the ratings so they become well known to publishers as movie ratings are today, perhaps better known. Which is great to put into effect, but it can easily crumble unless there isn't support, and can push developers away. Jack Heinstein, Vice President of Electronic Arts, spoke for the video game industry and mentions 13 points about the rating system. Nintendo, Sega, Atari, 3DO, Walmart, Sears, Toys R Us, and Blockbuster all agreed to have the rating system in place by Christmas of 1994, and any game submitted after November 1st, 1994 will be subject to the rating system. A new industry trade association will be formed and established an independent arm of that association as a ratings board, made up of people from a variety of fields across educators, parents, child development experts, that will have a final say for the ratings of games before they reach shelves. There will be intensive consultations and research with experts to develop guidelines and test different rating categories to determine which ones will be the most effective and easily understood by consumers. The rating systems will be accompanied by vocabulary describing the content of the title, explaining why a specific game received the rating. All video game packaging and advertising across all media will display the rating symbol. Video game publishers will be required to submit the most extreme content of their title to obtain a rating before publishing. The rating system will have tough sanctions against any company that breaks the rules, including withholding information or obtaining a rating fraudulently. Create a voluntary advertising code of conduct for association members that all advertising companies and retailers will abide by. Bring in retail companies to develop a system that they can help support and understand. Actively soliciting support for the system from every entertainment software publisher, regardless of platform and development country. Allowing arcade operators and manufacturers to participate in the ratings process and adopt the rating system. Every single game that is rated must display that rating in whatever form it is delivered. An intensive consumer and retailer education campaign will be conducted to ensure that everyone understands the system. And with these points, Senators Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl were finally happy with the process being made by the industry, and had faith that a system would be in place by the holiday period in 1994. While a few of these points no longer matter today, such as a marketing campaign, I doubt they're even continuing to advertise the rating system in retail stores, otherwise the majority of them are still standing today. This coalesced into the Entertainment Software Rating Board, which was founded by the Entertainment Software Association. And fun fact, the Entertainment Software Association was the company that hosted and ran E3 every year, when it existed anyway. With any public company that manages to control a whole industry, there is always a challenge that occurs when reviewing every single title or product that is made. Jack Heinstein mentioned that it was even more challenging than many of us had imagined. It is daunting enough to develop and implement in a very short time a system capable of rating 2,500 titles annually. To put this in perspective, that's 4 times the level that the Motion Picture Association of America reviews annually. This was way back in 1994, and thinking about how many titles are getting developed now shows how well an automated system handles all these titles and still sticks to the original goals set out by the industry. Jack raised various smaller points during the hearing that I'll quickly run through. Of course, if anyone abuses the system, they'll get punished for it, such as showing a less violent version to get the rating and then publishing another version. Advertising for video games that receive a higher rating must not be advertised during children or a younger audience's programming. The rating system is voluntary, and publishers and companies can't be forced to have their games rated as a requirement. Toys R Us, Walmart and Babbage's, don't worry if you don't know, no one else does, but all 3 agreed to only purchase games that had been rated by the rating system. All these were important decisions made and still impact the rating system today. While digital games that are normally indie titles aren't as strict or gonna have a physical release, rest in peace physical media, they don't receive a rating. All physically released titles must have a rating to be sold. Australia doesn't have a fancy system compared to the United States. There were a few talks about classifying video games. No one wanted a third party to get involved other than the Australian government, and that it would fall under the Australian Classification Board, or ACB for short. Not to get confused with the ABC being American Broadcasting Company, or even the Australian Broadcasting Company. The classification scheme, which would be separate from any existing system within Australia at the time, was originally idolised in 1993, and started in the lower house on violence within video games. On April 11, 1994, the initial classification scheme was introduced. However, it wasn't sent into Parliament until the 29th of June, and from there it still had to get approved by the Parliament of Australia. As the scheme was separate, it took longer to get approved by the Parliament. It would follow closely with the scheme for films already in place, but would be managed separately. The rating system was approved with only 4 ratings and was enforced on the 1st of January 1995, being called the Classification Act for 1995. There are some weird differences for ratings within Australia. Firstly, the ratings had different age ranges compared to every other media released within Australia. Then in 2005, the Classification Act was changed to include an R, or restricted rating, and to move away from separate age ranges to more closely match the current ratings for film and media, and also including similar colour coding across the letters, so G, or general, would be green on all material to make it universal. Now, let's talk about ratings, which is extremely weird and confusing. Since the rating system was introduced, Night Trap could finally get released in Australia. It received a mature or M rating. Like, okay, makes sense. But when you bring in Mortal Kombat, where your pixelated character removes a spine, it receives a mature audience's 15+, or MA 15+ rating. Now we're getting confused. Like, how does Mortal Kombat receive a rating higher than the game that features no motion video compared to Night Trap, described as torturing women and being sexually violent? Don't worry, it gets worse. Talking about the original Doom, it also received a higher rating than Night Trap with mature audiences, or MA. Like, I don't even know how this makes sense. This is just the Australian rating system. As I mentioned already, they censored the gore effects from Left 4 Dead 2, which, if Valve didn't, their game wouldn't be sold. Like, I am fairly sure as an Australian, we have strict laws in terms of classification. And from now on, ever since 1995, games are now being rated. And these were just the main two. European and Asia countries have their systems, which adopt points from both Australia and ESRB, which controls the rating across the North American countries. To make the process smooth across all countries, since so many have different ratings, such as in Australia we use letters, while other countries use numbers, an international company was formed in 2013 known as the International Age Rating Coalition, or by IARC. The goal of IARC is to make the process for developers to obtain a rating more efficiently, instead of applying for each individual country or union. Quoting their official website, they state that the IARC simplifies the process by which developers obtain age rating from different regions across the world, by reducing it to a single set of questions about their products and content and interactive elements. While the ratings have been made easier to achieve, and that there are more mature and adult games being produced, it can all be traced back to Night Trap. Robert Wokeman, who wrote an article for Medium, provided the best summary of the whole situation, stating that these senators were dead serious about stopping games like this and Mortal Kombat from ruining children. Alas, the only thing that came out of the whole ordeal was the establishment of the ESRB ratings board, which isn't the end of the world. After the creation of the ESRB and classification schemes across the globe for video games, Digital Pictures went defunct in 1996. They did release other games that used full motion video after Night Trap, but to no one's surprise, they all flopped. As the internet became more mainstream during the early 2000s, information surrounding Night Trap became more well known, and there was more public discourse surrounding Night Trap, and the hope to return to store shelves, utilizing modern hardware for a new generation to experience. In 2014, James Riley, the game's director, mentioned in a private Facebook group that he hopes to release Night Trap again, stating, "I do plan to re-release Night Trap and have been talking with a number of interested parties to do so. However, the specific platforms have not been confirmed, and I will let you know once I have a definite plan and release schedule." This is hopeful that we'll end up seeing Night Trap again, and since it would be re-released, it would have to apply for a new rating. Only a few months later, in August 2014, it was announced that Night Trap would return in Night Trap Revamped, which would feature a HD remake of the original game being ported to multiple consoles and PCs. But it wasn't announced that it was officially coming, instead as a Kickstarter. And for those who don't already know, multiple Kickstarters failed to meet their goals, with roughly 50% failing, and even 9% failed to receive anything at all. And this is also the same with the promises made, which I'll get onto further soon. On the official Kickstarter page, they say that crafting a HD version of the game is moderately challenging. Although the biggest task, creating a digital HD transfer of the elements, has already been completed, we've also identified and reached agreement with the developer we will use to complete the game. We feel comfortable saying that we will be able to finish the the new version, and have it in the hands of supporters within 6 months of close of this campaign. There were constant questions surrounding the full Kickstarter, as they were requesting $330,000 United States dollar, which is a lot of money. And when they state that they've already completed a digital transfer of the footage, even saying that they have a development team lined up, but there was no announcement or showcase of this occurring. It gets even more confusing with the pledge levels, totaling 7. They start out very basic, being a copy of the CD when it releases. Moves on to some autograph CDs, early access to the game, access to original development documents, personal notes, and the most interesting, even getting your name as an executive producer in the credits. There are so many levels of backing, and of course it doesn't answer any questions. The community behind Night Trap emerged online and started questioning what was written on the Kickstarter, with a lot of backlash to follow. Tom Zito, if you remember his name, one of the co-founders of Digital Pictures and executive producer for this re-release version, spoke to Kotaku, trying to answer a few questions. First, surrounding the cost of the backing, stating that it costs us $250,000 to buy the rights. So, you add on development costs, manufacturing costs, and fulfillment costs, it's more than $330,000. That was an amount of money we felt comfortable with bringing in to reduce our risk. We put in $250,000 to buy the rights. I will say part of the Kickstarter will reimburse us for the rights, but won't make us whole. Other questions about the development were also raised, surrounding the amount of RAM required to display all these videos at once, only releasing a limited number of physical games, and that it can only be purchasable by pledging on the Kickstarter, with Tom not answering the questions, just provides a PR statement instead. When asked about if the team behind the Kickstarter can complete the remaster, he replied with, "We can complete the product, that's not an issue. It's not for everybody. Clearly nothing is for everybody. That just shows that lots of people have lots of different opinions." After the interview with Kotaku, the Kickstarter was updated, stating that we've had lots of comments and questions from folks, some of who think that we're trying to raise too much money, and some of whom think we're not raising enough. Without divulging confidences we have signed in writing, we can tell you that the 4 of us have invested low 6 figures for the game rights, and have committed low 6 figures to a developer we want to work with. If we were to only raise $330,000, we would cover the development, manufacturing and fulfillment costs, but have not recouped our rights investment. That said, we believe Night Trap has long-term value, and are happy to have made that investment. And then what happens next? Radio silence. Once the goal was fulfilled, the game was meant to be shipped and completed in April 2015, but it wasn't achieved. They only received 12% of the total amount required to complete this remaster. And then guess what happens again afterwards? Radio silence. In 2015, the team went quiet and disappeared after the Kickstarter didn't fulfill its goals. In 2016, an anonymous YouTube video appeared and showed Night Trap working on a smart device, or smartphone. It was later confirmed to be published and developed by Tiger Hugel, who spent 3 days recreating Night Trap to work on a mobile device. It was glitchy, but it worked. Previously, Tyler had been porting over previous full-motion video games to newer hardware, even from Digital Pictures' official lineup of games. He previously ported over Double Switch and Quarterback Attack, and then was bored on what to do next, so he decided to have a shot at porting over Night Trap. His friends encouraged him to share it online, so he posted it to YouTube. Once it was online, it exploded, receiving a lot of media attention, primarily within the gaming circle, and then the video quickly disappeared, with no new information to come from the video or who published it at the time. People believed that Night Trap could get released again. After the video received a lot of attention, more than Tyler expected, he decided to personally reach out to Tom Zito to get permission to fully develop Night Trap. Tom was enthusiastic about the idea of re-releasing Night Trap and gave permission for Tyler to develop it. Tyler did run into some issues during the development of Night Trap. The original source code no longer existed, and even if it did, Tyler would have to rewrite it anyway to a more common programming language and to work across multiple platforms. As a result, Tyler had to play the original game multiple times to make sure all the cues correctly matched the original as best as possible. The master recordings also no longer existed. They were put somewhere in some box that no one remembers anymore, even though Digital Pictures no longer exists. Luckily, James kept a copy of the footage and provided it to Tyler, but it's not the cleanest recording, since there are some glitches that occur but you'll see more than the Sega CD's version. Tyler went on to develop and publish Night Trap by himself under his solo company of Screaming Villains. Night Trap 25th Anniversary Edition released in 2017 and received immense praise as it kept to the original release and brought Night Trap into the new generation and across multiple hardware, including the Nintendo Switch. Since Night Trap was released, it had to apply for a new rating, coming full circle since the very game created ratings, receiving a teen rating in North America and a MA15+ in Australia, higher than the original release being a mature. Another reason on why Australia has weird restrictions. Night Trap was finally released. After a long 25 years, the hopes of returning to the house to push those traps had finally come true. What does this whole situation mean for the future of video games? Well, surprisingly, not much. While the introduction of rating systems globally have changed the landscape of video games from the early 90s and to the early 2010s, making it harder for a younger audience to attain more violent games, such as Night Trap and Mortal Kombat, it does restrict an 8-year-old from attaining these games themselves by going into a retail store, but it doesn't stop the parent from buying it for them. Wout van Helden spoke to The Guardian about the rating system and provided the perfect statement by saying, "We believe it is a sign of healthy classification board that it evolves in line with the cultural expectations and continues to ensure that the audiences understand the type of content present in games." As the video game industry continues to evolve, audiences get older and the rating board needs to evolve instead of being stuck in the 90s. Throughout each hearing, there were continuous claims that games like Night Trap result in people being more violent or enjoy torturing other people. These claims all primarily date back to the first Senate hearing back in 1993, where Dr. Eugene Proviso, who spoke mostly about nonsense claims, but said children who see or play these games often inflict torture to other people physically. Now, picture the meme from SpongeBob.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
No matter how many times this gets disputed, people continue to believe there is a link, even though numerous studies have been conducted to prove there is no link. With the American Psychological Association, or APA for short, even said to stop making this connection. Christopher Ferguson, a psychology professor at the Stenson University in Florida, said that, if we're talking about violence, then the evidence is very clear there is no causal link to violence video games. That's pretty established at this point. Parker Page said in the Senate hearing in 1993 about the other side, stating that there are some folks who believe that violent video games can drain away aggression, that after a kid plays a violent video game, they in fact will have a cathartic effect and will be less violent. And yet there is no link to either point, and games in modern society have become more violent and gory. As I mentioned, games like Grand Theft Auto 5, Destroy All Humans, and even Left 4 Dead actually show blood, guts, and you physically murder people, yet an odd neck drill goes too far? For Night Trap's future, James Riley mentioned that Night Trap 2 is currently in the early stages of development, way back in 2017. Radio silence since then, as nothing has been released since the initial announcement, other than that the game will be playable in static or 2D environment and also in VR. To this day, we don't even know if it's still in development. There's a small community who believes it is, and if it does get released, will it receive a higher rating than the original game that created video game ratings? We'll wait and see. While Night Trap has changed the landscape of video games and impacted the video game industry more than people realise, it's left its mark and improved the whole industry. Night Trap is still on the list of the most violent video games, and even compared to Corpse Killer, another game developed by Digital Pictures, it's way worse than Night Trap, yet pushed aside. For the first time ever, when various governments sprung into action to take down Night Trap, a singled out title released on a console that is considered a flop, no one would believe that a single game caused such an uproar, mainly because of the influence of the media. Now we're in an environment where video games are rated, and aren't even impactful in making decisions, normally just pushed aside compared to the latest title from your favourite publisher. Night Trap received many names describing its content, from shameful, ultra-violent, sick, and disgusting, Ashley Day summarizes Night Trap by stating, "I can't help but wonder if Night Trap's reputation is an unfortunate side effect of both its manufacturer controversy and its ultimately delayed release. While Night Trap was regulated to a B-tier game for an add-on system that few could afford and even few were cared for, it's fair to say this game was in the wrong place at the wrong time."